We really came to the last part of Mark's Gospel, and it ends, of course, by talking about the resurrection of Christ. And we notice that there are actually three different endings to the Gospel of Mark. And the longer ending, that's actually 16:9 through 19, the last 10 verses, were added in, probably edited in by the church or by somebody later on. But in any case, it really talks about the resurrection of Christ appearing to Mary Magdalena, Mary of Magdala. And I wanted to talk about that part of it a little because I noticed, I never realized how much Protestants had ceased being Christians and become Gnostics. I mean, I've seen elements of it for a long time, but when people cut themselves off from the church, it's like a piece of vine. When you cut it off the grapevine, it dies. So when people cut themselves off from the body of the church, as Protestants have, then they can't hold on to real Christian faith. And that's why they keep dividing and subdividing and splitting apart and all of that, in a way. But why they drift into Gnosticism. Now, let me explain something about Gnosticism. The Gnostics always kind of looked down a little bit on the human body. In many cases, they thought that everything that was material was evil. The rocks, the trees, human body, everything. In a way, almost like a denial that God created everything. And they talk about the soul or the spirit existing completely separate from the body. They had the idea that an evil God, there were two gods, an evil one and a good God. And the evil one put the soul, trapped it in the body. So the body is like a prison to the soul. This is something that Plato taught. But Plato was also a member of a Gnostic religion, Gnostic sect, the Opic Gnosticism. And somehow this was picked up in the West, even by the Roman Catholics, in a way, that the body had to suffer so you could liberate the soul. A lot of our people think that when the soul departs the body, it can operate just completely, just like it did before. But, of course, the Holy Fathers tell us that's not true. And when you mention it to some of our people, they go, well, I read it in some book. Well, that's what I understood the teaching in the church was. I said, well, do you ever read the Holy Fathers to see what the church actually teaches, what the Holy Fathers teach? And I didn't know quite how far this Protestant Gnosticism had gone till I was talking to some recently and found out that they don't actually believe in the resurrection anymore. The same reason the Greeks didn't believe in the resurrection, because they think the body is something wrong with it. They came to the belief that they're going to get a completely new body after the resurrection, and the soul's already in heaven and it'll get a new body. But the idea of the resurrection of the dead isn't really there anymore, even though we're told in Scripture that the tombs opened and the bodies of the dead are rose, that the graves will open and the bodies of the dead will arise. But we know that the human body will be transfigured in heaven, be perfected. And Apostle Paul, though, says that those of us who are alive, we won't hinder those who are in the graves from rising from the dead, and will be gathered afterward. Now, one of the great Holy Fathers was St. Simeon, the new theologian. And St. Simeon had, well, some of the great saints experience the divine light of the heavenly kingdom in this life, although they give absolutely no description of it. And St. Simeon says the same thing that Apostle Paul said. He said, the whole room and I myself was completely filled with the divine light. And I didn't know whether I was in the body or out of the body, but as I came to myself, I realized that, yes, I was here in the tabernacle of my body all the time, but I had experienced body and soul together. Because God created us body and soul together, so body and soul are both sacred, they're both holy. And the idea that the body that God created for us wouldn't rise from the dead and be transfigured is really Gnosticism, because there's something wrong with the body that God created in the first place, and the soul has to be liberated from that body. But St. Simeon says, I realized that I had become completely filled with light, the divine light. And he said, and then I understood that this is what will happen to those who are still alive when Christ returns. The bodies will rise from the grave and be transfigured. But the body of those who are still alive will also be transformed or transfigured. And it's just that there won't be any limitations on the body anymore. You know, there are no limitations of any of the limitations that we know. So transfigured, well, perfected, brought to total perfection. And this is actually, the Holy Fathers will tell us that the soul without the body is not a complete person. The body without the soul is not a complete person. But the soul and the body together, as created by God, is a complete person. And so in the resurrection, we'll have this transfigured body. But this also has to do with Christ after the resurrection. That at first some people didn't recognize him, because of course after the resurrection he had really transfigured body again. And at first when Mary Magdalene comes to him, he said to Mary Magdalene, don't touch me because I'm not ascended to your Father and to my Father. And so there was something to show here. She couldn't touch him the first time, but the second time she could. And to show that there was a great change that was taking place, some kind of transfiguration that was taking place. And yet it was the same body that Christ had in this life, because Apostle Thomas could feel the wounds and the nail print. And I think this was given to us as a revelation, why Apostle Thomas should feel the wound and the nail print, and why Christ should take some food and eat, although obviously he wouldn't have needed it. But what he's actually revealing to us here is that the human body is sacred. The human body is created by God, beloved by God. It is a temple of the Holy Spirit. And it's holy and sacred. And when we have a funeral service, you know, it takes a little while. We don't have a short funeral service, because we're not just getting rid of the remains. This is a sacred treasure, and we're burying the sacred treasure in the ground, knowing that it'll be raised up on the last day and transfigured. And that those who remain in this life, as St. Simeon said, I realized that those who remain would, of course, be penetrated totally with the divine light and divine grace, and be transfigured also. And all of our limitations would, of course, vanish. And Christ is revealing something of this to us already, because, of course, there was already Gnostic ideas around that the human body was evil. And that's why I think some people even got to the point where, like Augustine of Hippo in the West, said that marriage was a venial sin. Marriage itself is a sin. It's under a guise of respectability for the sake of procreation, but essentially, since considering the body to be kind of evil or negative in a way, not having a full respect or reverence for the human body, they were also opposed, thought that any kind of sexual relations were sinful, because it involves the human body. And in many of the Gnostic cults, they would never have children, because to have children would be, they thought, trapping another soul in matter. And they didn't want to do that because matter was evil. And so they avoided having children. And there's a little bit of that in Augustine as well, because he had some peculiar ideas about the body and sexuality and marriage. And this is one of the reasons that Roman Catholic priests are not married, because if Augustine was very influential in the West, and he said that marriage was a sin, a venial sin. I mean, we don't have those terms in the Orthodox Church, you know, sin is sin, period. But they have venial sin, mortal sin, and not so mortal, but not quite venial, and all kinds of, you know, designations. And this is one of the reasons. So Catholic priests couldn't get married because they shouldn't have venial sin. They should be put in a position where they can have real sin. I once had a close Roman Catholic friend who told me, he's a priest, and he said, I could have a child with my housekeeper, and nobody would think much, as long as I did not commit the sin of marrying her. So, you see, it's better to have the venial sin of marriage than to have the mortal sin of fornication, I guess. But anyway, this is, the Latins have, you know, they coded everything. Everything has sort of legal descriptions and all. But why I wanted to mention this in the resurrection of the dead is it was, in a way, you know, Christ had a transfigured body, and it wasn't exactly the same, and he wasn't recognized immediately. So how was he recognized? And I think this is a revelation to us about the church too, because when Christ was going to Emmaus with Luke and Cleophas, and they didn't recognize him, likely he didn't want them to, but he started explaining the scripture to them. And as I think Luke later said, didn't our hearts burn within us when he was explaining the scripture? But how did they recognize him? The same way we recognize him on Sunday morning in the breaking of the bread. When he sat down and broke the bread and distributed, then they recognized him. And this is the moment when we truly recognize Christ too, when we have Holy Communion with the breaking of the bread. And so that in itself was a revelation to us about how future generations who couldn't see him in the flesh would see and recognize him in the breaking of the bread, in the Holy Communion. But other times he appears, standing on the shore when some of the apostles are fishing, and at the distance they can't see him clearly and they don't recognize him. But suddenly John does recognize him and says, it's the Lord. And of course Peter leaps out of the boat and goes running through the water. This time he didn't try to run out of it, he just ran through it because they came where it was shallow. And then the miracle of the fishes, of course, clearly revealed that Christ, who he is. So that I'm often asked this question, why didn't they recognize him every time? But some people recognized him sometimes. Remember, the women in the garden weren't looking at him. They were looking down and likely weeping, and they thought the gardener was there. It wasn't until they looked up and looked at him when he said Mary that he was recognized. But this is also a mystery of the resurrection itself. Christ is really revealing to us in the resurrection we'll have a transfigured body. But we can't think that it won't be the same body, because that's kind of based on the idea that the body is evil. And the resurrection shouldn't be a great mystery, because God created us from the dust of the earth in the beginning, and seawater. If he created us from the dust of the earth in the beginning, he can raise us from dust of the earth again. And that's, the resurrection is very real. The graves will open, and the bodies of the dead will rise. And in transfigure and reunited with the soul. There's something, you know, we have another Gnostic movement these days. One of them believes in out-of-body experiences, which of course are impossible. St. John Chrysostom and others tell us that won't happen. The other one is that we can evolve to such a point where we would be just spiritual and we wouldn't have bodies at all. It's called transhumanism. And it's a very big movement, and it's very big in Russia, as a matter of fact, among some science, well, some kind of iffy scientists. And the idea still here is that there's something wrong with the human body. And we can't really be Christians if we think there's something wrong with the human body, because God created the human body, and he created the soul and body together. And if you stop to think, though, how many things couldn't be experienced without the body, in a way. You know, it's a struggle, but the body itself is not what's struggling. It's our mind that's struggling. The body can't commit sin by itself. The mind has to conceive it and decide to follow it. And this is what the Holy Fathers have told us. I think St. Ambrose of Milan, one or two others, says that you couldn't, when the soul departs the body, it's not judged at all. It just has the knowledge and awareness of what its destiny is. That's called particular judgment because the conscience judges you and knows. But he said it's not proper that the soul, which didn't sin alone, should be judged alone. So the judgment doesn't take place until the resurrection, because the body and the soul cooperated together in everything that we do. And even in our virtues, even to be rewarded for the positive, the body and the soul did these things together. And so they'll be rewarded together. There's a Jewish story from some of the Jewish, the other literature outside of the Bible. And you tell about a wealthy man who had an orchard, and he wanted somebody to guard the orchard, but he didn't want the guard to steal any of the fruit. So he got a crippled man who would sit on the bench, and he could tell if anybody was around. And the person who was there to help him, because he couldn't walk, was a blind man, so he couldn't see to take the fruit. And the wealthy man came back to the orchard and noticed some of the best fruit from high up on the tree was missing. And the blind man said, well, I couldn't take it, I couldn't see it. And the crippled man said, well, I couldn't take it because I can't walk. So it says the lord of the master of the orchard sat the crippled man on the shoulders of the blind man, and he judged the two as one. And he said, and so he will do with the soul and the body on Judgment Day. He'll place the soul back in the body and judge the two as one, because they are one. And it's just that interesting to me how people like Protestants have cut themselves off completely from the tradition and understanding of the church. And you know, you can always rummage through the scripture and try to find a proof text to prove anything you want to prove. You know, you go through Apostle Paul, even through the Gospels, and if you have an idea in your head and you set out to prove the idea, rather than trying to find out what it says and let that shape your idea, that's what's going on here. And one of the worst heresies in the whole Protestant world is the idea of the rapture. Now, you've all heard of the rapture. I mean, it's a big deal. That Christians will be raptured before there's a tribulation, the last tribulation in Antichrist. And this was a teaching that was invented in 1840, and it turned out it was just a dream that this Pastor Darby of the Plymouth Brethren, he had this dream about the rapture. And he said, oh, it must be a revelation from God.
What's rapture?
Okay?
What's rapture?
Rapture means that the Christians, the people who are, as they say, born again, when the tribulation starts and the suffering starts, they'll be caught up into the sky, raptured up into the sky, so they won't have to suffer at all. And I had a public debate with one of them once in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, and he said, but God would never allow believing Christians to suffer. And I said, okay, what about the martyrs of the first 3 centuries who suffered horribly? And the martyrs under the Turks in Serbia, Bulgaria, you know, Greece and other places. Well, they didn't know anything about that, of course. They didn't even know about the ancient martyrs, really. I mean, absolutely no knowledge whatsoever of the history of the church or of what the ancient church taught and believed. Nothing at all. They just go through and find proof texts to try to fool themselves that the Bible means what they're saying it means. And now, what about the martyrs under communism? You know, all of these people, all these holy martyrs. And the church, the Roman Empire was converted to Christ by martyrs, not by preachers. And well, they didn't know anything about that, but they don't want to suffer. They don't. All they know is that they won't suffer. And I said, okay, that's a cowardly cop-out. But anyway, that shows how shallow your Christianity really is. The other part of it is that it's got to the point where they believe that they'll be raptured up in the sky, and then they get to watch all the sinners suffer and enjoy it. They even have rapture games they're called left behind games, people left behind. And it's kind of tragic because on the one side you have people, obviously Muslims, because they dress like Muslims. And on the other side, Christians with Bibles. And somehow in the game, the Christians keep shoving the Bible at the Muslim. And if after so many tries he doesn't accept it, they get to kill him. I mean, that's a great Christian game. That's marvelous. But it just shows you how far off the track people can go when they cut themselves off from the vine and separate themselves from the living body of the church in it. I mean, we have enough trouble within the church keeping people focused on the gospel instead of our superstitions. And also, trying to get people to be, our human nature is such. Sometimes we slander people because we think it's defensive. And sometimes for other various reasons. It's, a woman is kind of in love with the same man that somebody else is in love with him also. And she starts dropping these little things, well, she's not what you think she is. And if you knew her better, you'd feel differently. So what he's trying to do is make this man have suspicions about the other woman. Because if he leaves her, maybe she'll have a chance in it. And that happens in human nature. In businesses, I found out in corporations, when there's a promotion possibility, or people are getting to that level where they might be promoted into executive positions, they'll try to undermine everybody else, even people who have been their friends all these years. That they start spreading little innuendos and stories and making them bigger and bigger, trying to weaken somebody else who might be a competitor for that promotion. They'll even go so far as to sometimes they'll have their wife hint to the competitor's wife that, well, maybe he's having an affair with somebody at work or something. And then if they cause turmoil at home, the man that might reflect in his work, and then he won't get the promotion the fellow started the stories with. So it can be extremely malicious and all. But it's kind of human nature for us to gossip a bit. But we have to be really careful of it too, because we're told we'll be judged for every idle word. And by idle words, he really means things like gossip and slander, and things that we say that are mischievous, or trying to hurt somebody else. So, and Apostle Paul warns us that slanderers, gossipers, and backbiters will not enter the heavenly kingdom. That's a powerful statement, and we need to pay attention to it and all. And in a way, sometimes Gnosticism itself actually slanders the human body. And when we sort of degrade the human body, we also degrade God, because he created it. And he created body and soul together as one. So we have to realize that when we're told that the body's a temple, then we have to realize that it's not Christian to suggest that something's wrong with the human body. It's not Christian to suggest that the body we lived in will not be resurrected with us. It's Gnosticism. It's not Christian. So that's what I wanted to say about the resurrection and why Christ appears different. But it appears different because it's a transfigured body. But to demonstrate to us that it's the same body, he allows Thomas to feel the nail prints and the wound at his side. So this is the same body, not a different one, just transfigured. So anyway, that's the area that I wanted to cover today. So if anybody has any questions or anything, yeah. No, wait a minute. We can record. Yeah. Go ahead and put it on.
I could never understand what will happen after resurrection.
Well, we also don't believe that actually the Bible never says the world to come. It says the age to come. So we don't believe in the destruction of the universe, but the transfiguration of the universe. It's the transfigured cosmos, that the whole universe, the earth, everything will be transfigured, that into a kind of perfection. And that's why, if you look at the scripture, sometimes people mistranslate it to say the world to come. Even in the symbol of faith, some people have mistranslated it. At the end, it says, and I believe in the world to come. It doesn't say that, though. It says the age to come. Think what it says in Greek or Slavonic. The aeon, the age to come. So the whole universe, everything be transfigured. So somebody said, well, where is the heavenly kingdom? The heavenly kingdom is every place where God is present, every place where man fellowships directly with God through Christ. The heavenly kingdom is everywhere. And it's manifested when we truly fellowship with Jesus Christ. And in the age to come, of course, everything is seen clearly. And as the apostle says, we see only in a mirror now, darkly, but then we'll see face to face and everything will be clear. But every place in the universe, see, we say, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Well, where is the will of God done? Where the angels who are loyal or faithful to God accepted his will and followed it. How is the will of God done on earth as it is in heaven? It's done in the heart of everyone who truly strives to be obedient to God, to love God and be obedient to God. And sometimes, in prayer life, we can actually have a real taste of the heavenly kingdom in our heart. We can actually experience, even if only for a moment, the sort of glory in our heart and the inexpressible joy. And so the transfigured universe.
So
how exactly, into what exactly, I can't say, but in any case, the universe is not going to be destroyed. God's not going to destroy the works of his own hands, but really bring them to the fullness of perfection.
So the resurrection of the dead is not the moment for everybody.
Well, no, instantly, the resurrection takes place for everybody at once. And those who are still alive, as St. Simeon said, just penetrated with the divine light and transfigured. And that's...
If this happens once for everybody, then...
Yeah.
Where these people all will appear, there will be so many.
Well, the universe is big.
Oh, you mean it's just
Yes.
not on the earth, but somewhere else?
Well, yeah, we're talking about the universe,
moon
and with no limitations
No limitations.
on people, with no limitations. And after that, there's a constant growth and development in spirit and joy and all these things. But anyway, that's a mystery that's beyond our grasp, but the universe is very big. So, I mean, I don't know what it's going to look like. And even if somebody had a vision of it, they wouldn't be able to, as Apostle Paul says, I saw things which it's unlawful to speak of. So, you can't. St. John Chrysostom, that's what St. John Chrysostom says, that nobody would depart the body and see heavenly mysteries and come back and talk about them, because it says no one would be raised from the dead that way. Because if that were so, Satan would contrive to have it people appear to have died and appear to have returned from the dead and be able to say things that they saw there. And of course we see that happening, don't we? People appear to be dead and appear to have come back from the dead and tell some stories. But Chrysostom says it's not possible for it to be real, to actually happen in it. So, and even Lazarus said absolutely nothing about any experience he had or anything he saw. Not one word about it. The only story we have about Lazarus after the resurrection, we know that he'd gone to Cyprus, and likely because the Jews wanted to kill him, but then the destruction of Jerusalem came along anyway. And the story is, anyway, Lazarus was the bishop of Cyprus, and he was walking through the marketplace and he saw someone steal a clay pot. And he laughed, and he said, "How foolish, clay stealing clay." So anyway, that's anybody else who want to?
So the body and the soul are holy, obviously, because they're created by God, and having the body and the soul, He created a person.
Yeah.
Where is the mind coming in? Because mind is something that we create. Like,
You know, the mind is, it's twofold. The mind is a function of the brain, but the brain is an instrument of the mind, or a tool of the mind. And they pretty well work in tandem. You know, if you destroy one portion of the brain, something in your personhood or personality doesn't work anymore. So they're codependent, the mind and the brain. Consciousness is something else. You know, consciousness is moment by moment. It's not something really steady. It takes place moment by moment for us. But the mind is still quite a mystery. You know, we have some neuroscientists who look at the mind as something almost separate from the brain, but the brain as its instrument. And other neuroscientists were looking for the mind to be created by the brain, but somehow it doesn't seem to be. So it still remains a mystery in it. You know that there's a heavy dependence, because soul and body work together. They don't work independently of each other. And that's why we condemn teachings of out-of-body experiences. And like the fathers in the desert said, if in your prayer you appear to be leaving the body, then grab hold of yourself and bring yourself back even into the very depths. Because you can project your imagination out, but not your soul. And the trouble is your imagination picks up all kinds of things and brings them back. But that's the unity of soul and body is something that's absolute in the teachings of the Holy Father. That we're being told that, you know, the soul doesn't depart from the body without regret, because it's part of you. And that's why when people say, when did creatures become humans? At some point. Well, when soul and body were combined together as one, I mean, that's what a human being is. It says man became a living soul. So he became a living soul. Body and soul together became a living soul. And that's, so that's what's important about it.
I'm just wondering, what about cremation? Will cremation destroy the unity of soul and body?
Well, it's an odd thing to think about, because some of the saints, of course, were burned to death, and they were cremated. Some people are buried at sea, some people were eaten by lions. But, you know, God is able to raise us up from whatever condition. You know, that's, you know, it's in simply the will of God is its own authority and its own power. I think you'll see more cremations now, because when it gets to the point where to bury somebody in Vancouver is about $24,000 to $30,000, there are a lot of families that it's absolutely impossible to afford that. They simply can't do it. I mean, in the Moscow area, the church allows cremation. There's no place left to bury anybody in it. So that, you know, okay, if God is all powerful, then he can do whatever he wants. So, you know, that's at this point, I mean, only, so far as I know, only in Russia there's a blessing for cremations. In Japan, everybody has to be cremated. It's the law. You don't have a choice. There isn't any place, any land there. But it's to me, it's not an issue. They also have a funeral for somebody who's cremated just like anybody else. But they shouldn't cremate till after the funeral. That's all. We serve a funeral service. Why we're required to have an open coffin, unless there's some really, really dramatic reason, like a terrible accident or something. We don't serve on a closed coffin, because we're not serving for the person, we're serving together with the person. I mean, the person, the body is not the rubbish that we're carrying out. The body is a part of the person, and we're serving together with that person when we serve the funeral. So it's, you know, it's really a sacrament of the church, Christian burial. It's not listed in the Magic Seven that we kind of borrowed from the Roman Catholics, but it is a sacrament or holy mystery of the church. a Christian burial. And it's, has to be treated like that. But a lot of the funerals I serve, you know, the person is going to be cremated afterwards, sometimes sent back to Russia or Serbia or something. And, but unless you're very, very rich, it's very difficult to afford a funeral in many places. I mean, New York or Chicago, it's just almost impossible to do it. So, anyway, yeah.
When somebody departs, the soul departs the body.
Yeah.
The body goes into the ground, turns into dust.
Mm.
The soul gets the partial judgment, right? The primary judgment, whatever
Well,
you call that.
the partial judgment just means that the,
It's aware.
partial because only part of the person is there, not the whole person.
Oh, okay, so that's what.
And what it consists in is the conscience becomes aware, fully aware.
Okay.
This is a full awareness of the conscience of its condition.
So, and saying that, the soul is not in the hell, it's not in the heaven, right? It's not in the hell because nobody's in the hell right now.
Nobody's in hell doesn't
But-
exist yet.
Yet. But, so we're exactly,
Well, that's a good question. But
Can
when
we do that?
when Saint Simeon was Saint Simeon of Thessaloniki, I believe he's the one said that the ninth day service is because the soul is kept by the 9 orders of angels until the resurrection. So where, what, how, you know, we can't know that. You know, we have all these goofy, I think really goofy mythologies about the 3rd, 9th, and 40th day service, and the 1-year service. And and even the supposed source of them is goofy. You know, the idea that the soul wanders for 3 days and hovers over this and that and the other thing, and on the 9th day it goes to heaven and worships God at the very throne of God. And then it goes to hell and sees the torments of the damned, and then afterwards, I don't know, gets a gin tonic or something. But it's the source of that story, of course, is the Egyptian Book of the Dead. So we find all of these mythologies like that coming from Egypt, naturally, because Egyptians have lived for, you know, 5,000 years with Egyptian culture. So all these things are deeply ingrained in folk culture. So we get a lot of these stories out of Egyptian folk culture, and then from Alexandria they become, but that one about the soul nicking about here and there after the dead. There's a story that St. Macarius the Great was walking down the road. And it just happened that there was an angel walking the same way. It just happened. And St. Macarius was having a chat with the angel, and he said, you know, we serve on the 3rd, 9th, and 40th days, but nobody knows why we do that. Can you explain it to me? So then the angel gives them these details from the Egyptian Book of the Dead. And that, but of course St. Macarius never wrote anything in his entire life. We have things credited to St. Macarius, but he never wrote anything. And what we're actually told, it makes quite logical sense. I think it's in the Didascalion of the Holy 12 Apostles and the greatest liturgist in our history was St. Simeon of Thessaloniki. That on the 3rd day we celebrate because Christ rose from the dead on the 3rd day, guaranteeing the resurrection to us. On the 9th day, because the soul is kept with the 9 orders of angels until the resurrection. And on the 40th day, because Christ ascended into heaven, body and soul together, revealing to us that we also would enter into the heavenly kingdom, body and soul together. And of course, at the end of 1 year, we celebrate, because these services are really for us. They're not for the dead person, they're for us. They're stepping away from grief rituals to help us step away from grief. And at the end of 1 year, when you serve the 1 year memorial, in parts of Serbia at least, then you take off the black armband, and you can remarry. But what happens is, a person remarries too soon afterwards. They very often feel like they've betrayed the deceased spouse. And then there's a sense of guilt and feeling of betrayal about it. And that's just in human psychology, it just happens. So the church has given us this 1 year service so that we can have closure, and after that you can get married without feeling any kind of guilt or betrayal, because it's blessed and sanctified by the church. So it's actually an act of mercy to people for their psychological well-being. So these are stepping away from grief rituals. And it was chosen to do it on the 3rd and 40th days in particular because of the resurrection and the ascension. All this other hocus pocus that people have taken from the Egyptian Book of the Dead. You know, aerial toll houses and judgments and souls wandering here and there. St. John Chrysostom says that it's impossible, once the soul is taken from the body, for it to wander here any longer, but it's taken away immediately to the place of its repose. And then somebody comes along and says, oh yeah, but you know, my grandmother told me that, yeah, and your grandmother also told you either to put a candle in the window so the soul could find its way back, or to cover the windows with blinds so it couldn't find its way back. And to hop backward 3 times before you when you come to the grave, so that the soul can't grab you and drag you down, whatever. You know, there are all these blow trumpets in Moldova, of Romania, where they blow the trumpets in front of the coffin to scare the evil spirits away, and believe me, it would. The straight long trumpets, they sound horrid, and the men are probably looped by the time they're playing the trumpets anyway. But I actually couldn't resist, I blew one of the trumpets once. So, oh, somebody told me, but if you don't scare the evil spirits away and they get into the coffin, the person might become a vampire. Says, that's why we put a lot of dirt on top of them, you know, to keep them down there. In Serbia, we pour slivovic on the grave regularly so that, you know, there's no reason to come up. Well, Serbs get thirsty, you know. But in any case, these superstitions have absolutely no meaning ultimately to them. Yeah. But people hold on to them so tightly and say, oh no, this is the Orthodox teaching. Right, it's the Orthodox teaching. When the priest comes to the house to see somebody sick, he has to put both feet together and hop over the threshold. Yeah, you do, see, because people are watching. And if you put the left foot over the threshold first, it means the person is going to die. And if you put the right foot over the threshold first, it means they're going to live.
So you have to jump.
So you might set somebody up psychologically so they just give up because they'll say, oh, you're going to die, you put his left foot over the court first. So a lot of the priests in Russia would actually put their feet together and hop over the threshold, just for that reason, because of superstition. And I know it probably was in Russia too, but sometimes in Serbia, some parts of Serbia, not the pious parts, if you see a priest coming, you cross the street and walk on the other side because it's bad luck to meet a priest face to face in the morning. So, I mean, I've known priests, it would be bad luck to meet him no matter what time of day it was. But well, you know, it's like we have a Serbian story. Or is it there was these little platform ferries, you know, it was crossing the river and going over the Drina, and it turned over, and the priest drowned. This merchant went to tell Popadia, the Matushka, oh, I'm sorry, your husband drowned in the river. He says, well, why didn't you save him? He says, well, I kept trying to save him. I said, give me your hand, and he didn't reach out. He said, fool, you should have said, take my hand. You know, priests are used to taking, not giving. So, anyway, you can try to knock it out.